There's this really fascinating report about Bernie Sanders in BuzzFeed. It's reported by Ruby Kramer. She reports a lot on Bernie Sanders and his campaign. It says, the week Bernie Sanders realized he was losing. Interviews with nearly 24 aides, allies, and progressive operatives reveal a campaign struggling to reconcile reality with the emotions of a movement that simply fell short. Now, I'll make sure to leave the link in the description so you can go check that out yourself. Now, this is a really interesting one where it says, you could see it last week when his motorcade arrived for a rally at the fairgrounds in Salt Lake City, and all they could do was watch as a 7-person field rapidly shrunk to a 2-man race, with candidates flying in secret to line up behind Joe Biden in Dallas. As the news broke, a senior aide stood in the fairgrounds parking lot near a line of SUVs, visibly shaking with nerves. You saw it back in his Washington headquarters, where staffers reassured themselves by digging back in, as if by muscle memory, to an old trench. Did we really think they were going to let us have it? They told one another. You saw it after Super Tuesday, a loss across 10 states, when some senior aides began to worry that Biden wouldn't even show up to the next debate, simply because he wouldn't have to. And even as the campaign made a hard last play for Michigan, some aides said they could, quote, they could see, quote, the writing on the wall, and wondered if the boss did too. And then it basically goes on here to explain that it says, a few days ago when reporters asked in Phoenix, he couldn't, if he could explain why Biden was winning. He hadn't had a chance to dig into the numbers yet. He said, I honestly have not. I mean, I like doing those things, but I've been kind of frantically running around. He says, we're doing the best we can. All I can say is we're working as hard as we can. So, it says, he resisted change most often at the urging of his own aides, including over the last week's few, as some begged him to be more aggressive in his attacks against Biden. From the start of his second presidential bid, almost 13 months ago, his team liked to tell reporters that, unlike his race 4 years ago, this campaign was his campaign, and maybe it just wasn't working well enough. It says, at a hotel in downtown Burlington, where senior aides prepared to leave for New York ahead of a previously scheduled appearance on The Tonight Show with Jimmy Fallon, Sanders did not at any point say the words, I am staying in the race, but said he looked forward to attending the upcoming Democratic debate on Sunday. His wife, Jane Sanders, and members of their senior campaign looked on from the side of the room, all of them in matching stolid expressions. He knew he was losing the delegate race, he said, and he was losing the electability debate. His position, delivered in 10 minutes of prepared remarks, was not one of a candidate who expects to win, and Sanders, often mistaken by his critics as a movement politician with no interest in governing or institutionalizing change, wanted more than anything to win. It says interviews with nearly 24 aides, allies, and progressive operatives over the last week reveal a campaign struggling to reconcile the reality of the delegate math with the emotions of an entire progressive movement that now rests on the shoulders of a man who has pursued his aims with a single-minded focus for more than 50 years, who built a vast and obsessive following from almost nothing in 2016, who doesn't easily back down even when he knows he's lost. Quote, he was never able to expand his coalition. He just didn't succeed at it, said Mark Longabaugh, a top advisor, who split with the campaign early last year over strategic disagreements with the candidates. Let's see here. It goes on to say, even as anxiety grew in Sanders' Washington headquarters, the tight circle that travels around him mirrored the straightforward and laser-like focus of the candidate. Sanders is tough on his staff and prone to angry outbursts, but in pursuit of his political revolution, he is almost even-keeled, a temperament matched by his quiet campaign manager, Faiz Shakir. He's like Faiz, communication director Mike Koska once told reporters. He's always at a 5 out of 10. But for many outside the senator's small retinue of staff, the past week unfolded as if in slow motion, a muddle of frustration and sadness as they came to terms with what was happening. On the road, Sanders and the senior aides around him pressed as if little around them had changed. The divide isn't between the traveling staff and headquarters, one progressive operative close to the operation said this week. The divide is between reality and the candidate's head. Basically, they tried to get in contact with Elizabeth Warren to do an endorsement. That didn't end up happening. Others questioned whether Sanders could have prevented such a swift consolidation of the field had he reached out to candidates like Buttigieg and Klobuchar in a more concerted way. That's the Sanders model. They were going to do it themselves, said Adam Gentleson, a Democratic strategist who supported Warren. His challenge from day one was to reach out to people who weren't with him in 2016 and build a bridge to the rest of the party. I would feel differently about it if the other half of the equation was present for them, a wave of new voters and unprecedented youth turnout, but it's not there. Meanwhile, a small group of senior aides had been pushing Sanders for months to go harder on Biden. Here's a really interesting tidbit. Okay, this one is something I really want to highlight to you guys because it reveals why, and you know how we're all getting angry. I'm especially angry at this. Every time Bernie Sanders says something about Joe Biden, it's always prefaced with what? Joe Biden is a good friend of mine. Okay, this gives some insight on it that I had not thought about. I don't know if any of you guys thought about this. All right, this is the problem. Sanders actually liked him. Personally, they got along better than he ever did with Hillary Clinton, aides have said. The former vice president falls into an exclusive category for the Vermont senator. The people who were nice to Sanders before he mattered, as two aides put it recently. Back in January, it was the candidate's decision to personally apologize to Biden after one of his surrogates, Zephyr Teachout, wrote an op-ed about Biden's, quote, corruption problem. Now, that was a very weak move on Bernie's part, that he came out and basically did that. Even Bill Maher went on his show. He was talking about the report. He was like, dude, like, this is like, is he wrong? Is she wrong that Joe Biden is corrupt? Even Bill Maher said that. He literally went on his show Real Time and said that. Now, Hillary and Bernie strongly disliked each other. I think that Hillary disliked Bernie more than Bernie disliked her, but I still think Bernie justifiably disliked her. But this gives some insight as to why he refuses to really go hard on Biden and keeps prefacing all of his attacks. Most importantly, he keeps saying that Joe Biden can defeat Trump, which is false, but most importantly, it undercuts his argument for president. 58% of the people who are voting say that the most important issue for them is to take out Donald Trump. And if you constantly tell people that Joe can beat him, you're undermining your own argument to the nth degree, the highest degree. All right? But it's not even just that he's too nice of a guy, which is what he was. I had this problem with Bernie in 2016 too. He would tout that he's like, I'm the only campaign that hasn't run a negative ad. Bro, that's not a good thing. You need to win an election. You can't be this Mr. Nice guy. You got to really knuckle up and you got to get down, okay? You don't have to undermine your values. Just, go on the attack. Be an attack dog. He didn't do that. That was a big problem I had with him in 2016. Big problem I had with this guy in 2016. I was really angry about that. Felt like he could have gone harder on Hillary. Obama won in 2008. If you go back and watch those clips, he literally tore her to shreds nonstop. Seriously, it was insane. Obama never said, "Oh, I love Hillary Clinton. We go to get ice cream every Saturday." He didn't say that. He just went ham. He just went off, okay? And he was a savage, and that's why he won, because he savagely took her down, exposed her corruption, all right? Bernie Sanders, not so much, all right? Not so much. Now, and I guess it's extra because they were buddies even before Bernie Sanders was a national person. Like, before 2013, if you knew Bernie Sanders, you're a pretty massive political junkie at that point, right? So he wasn't really known. He's just senator for Vermont. Who cares about Vermontian senators? Here's also another interesting one. It says David Sirota, the hard-charging senior advisor who has frequently made attacks on Biden go viral on Twitter, became so enraged by his unwillingness to budge on the matter that he laid out his concerns in a starkly worded email to the candidate and senior aides after Super Tuesday. The message, two people familiar with the email said, "We do this or we lose." It talks about how Bernie started going after Biden after that. Private conversation earlier last week, Sanders staffers were already starting to talk about their mission beyond winning. Several pointed to a rally last Sunday in Grand Rapids, Michigan, where Reverend Jesse Jackson came off the sidelines of the race to endorse Sanders, a personal victory the candidate described privately as the most meaningful moment of the campaign. So basically what's going on is, and this is really sad, is that he seems to kind of be in this point where he's past it. Now also, this guy Mark Longabaugh basically explains that, here, let me read it to you. It says, he was never going to be one of those Walter Mondale or Hillary Clinton-esque figures who would be able to wire up the entire party. There was a potential for him to make some inroads. He got 42% of the vote last time. I always told him, if you make small inroads, you're not too far from 50. But that stuff just never came naturally to Bernie Sanders. It's a fair question, Larry Cohen, a longtime Sanders supporter who sits on the board of his political nonprofit, Our Revolution, said of whether the candidate missed a crucial opportunity. He's an amazing human being, and all amazing human beings are not perfect. And then Ari Rabin halved, was basically saying that he wasn't willing to change anything. And so the biggest weakness of this campaign has basically been the inability to change. When you are going into a battle like this, like one running for president, you have to at least exhaust all options. Okay, that's a crucial one, is exhausting all options. Now, he said he didn't court Jim Clyburn at all. That was a mistake. Even if we know he's not going to endorse him, it doesn't matter. You at least do it just so maybe he doesn't even step in the race. Maybe all of this could have been avoided if you don't put an endorsement in. Maybe you pressure him not to endorse Joe Biden. You know what I mean? That would be pretty big, right? But he's not good at that. So he's failed at making inroads. He's failed at making connections with anybody. And then the one guy who he keeps his connection with, Joe Biden, he, it's just not, it's not a good connection, right? The only connection he has is negatively affecting him. It's adversely affecting him. It's bad, all right? And so that's what you see going on here. And what's sad is Bernie seems to have gone down. He used to have 42%. Now he's like down to like 30, bro. He's getting rocked everywhere, He's getting demolished everywhere. I was just looking at some polls. He's down between 20 and 30 points, depending on the ones that you look at. I think he was down 30 in the Emerson polls. And so he has failed to switch gears. He has failed to pivot. You have to do that. Like if you're an NBA team, you go into an NBA series, and then you're getting mashed. Your strategy's not working in the playoffs. You don't just keep going with that strategy. You have to change your strategy. And so that's a really, really bad idea. The Thunder did that really well in 2016 against the Spurs, right? They were not doing so well the first game, but then they came back and stormed back, switched up their strategy, had Adams and Cantor both in the center, getting rebounds, killed the Spurs on rebounds, ended up winning the series. That's what you have to do. And so Bernie Sanders is just not as good of a campaigner as we could have hoped. He's a great dude, has a great record, but unfortunately, he's just not that great at campaigning. He just doesn't have it. Also, another key piece of this, I don't know how he missed it, is that his group of like advisors is super small. It's like 7 people, including his wife. So he doesn't really have anybody advising him, and so it's ridiculously hard to like get him to understand stuff or get messages to the guy, which really sucks. And so it's virtually impossible to get him to sort of say anything or to get him to do something. And also a lot of them are yes men. Like they won't disagree with him. They won't like go to a fight with him to really like push him to do stuff. So that's also a bad. Anytime you're surrounded by yes men, you're doomed. You're done for. It's over. And he's surrounded by yes men right now in his tight knit group. So that's going to be the downfall of his campaign. But his failure to really pivot and also to hammer on electability, which is the key issue of the election, big mistake. Big mistake, folks.